Hi everyone,
Hey,
welcome
what's up,
to
guys?
another weekly MSI Insider live stream. And for the viewers we already have for a longer time, you might recognize this face next to me. Martijn, welcome.
Thank you very much, Michiel. It's great to be back.
Yeah, to be back for you.
Feels
because
like home.
Martijn used to be an MSI employee and
Correct.
actually in our product marketing team.
Correct.
And well, basically what I'm doing now is what you used to do at MSI.
Gotta love the motherboards, man.
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah.
So it's really good to see you back.
Thank you.
Nowadays, Martijn works at AMD. And maybe you can explain a little bit about what you do there now.
Yeah, well, actually, I've just joined like in June, so it's been crazy a couple of weeks, and we have lots of great stuff coming, as you guys already know. But my job basically is continuing what I did at MSI, what I was good at, which means product management, business development, and all the feedback from end users, from you guys, from overclockers. I'm an overclocker myself, so you guys know this. And just make the products better, but also make the experience much more enjoyable and give you guys the best possible processors which you can buy.
So back in the hardware business.
Back in the hardware game. Yeah, feels great.
Yeah, good to be back.
Very good,
Nice.
very good. Yeah.
Today we also have a giveaway. If you go to msi.com/2/insider, there you can access the giveaway. You have several actions you can perform. The more actions you perform, the bigger chance you will have to win. So make sure to participate and you have a chance to win one of the $20 US Steam wallet codes. And especially if you have a new 3rd gen Ryzen system, I think you need some games with that as well.
Oh yeah.
If you cannot see the link, we will also post it in chat, so you can directly go to through the Gleam link and directly participate in the giveaway.
I can do this at home as well when I get back home because I need some games.
I think you're too late then.
Oh,
then
man.
it's already closed.
All right.
So
you guys
next time.
better pay attention and fill it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, to win some.
So today, like everyone saw in the introduction, I think, 3rd gen Ryzen.
Correct.
The wait is finally over.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, you all saw the reviews, I guess, from your local media, your preferred media. The reception has been great, and thank you all you guys for this high anticipation and the support you guys are giving, but also the feedback. All the last couple of years as well, when we first started Ryzen 1, we've gained a lot of feedback from you guys, which makes us much more proud as well to each time deliver better products and deliver everything you guys are asking for. So it's been great. I've brought one of them here today,
Nice.
which we're going to unbox in a little while. But yeah, I've also brought some background information, of course, to talk a little bit more about these products, because these are just amazing CPUs, amazing silicon to talk more about. And I'm sure we've got some stuff lined up which we can show you more about today. So I've prepared a few slides just to let you guys know, and Michiel and I can discuss about this, about what's changed actually. So it's not just the processor, it's also, within AM4 platform, there's X570 now, enabling PCI Gen4. And what we're seeing is that, you guys are already, interested in the new SSDs, in the new Navi graphics, for example, and allowing for better responsiveness for your system, faster loading of your game. So we're going to talk more about this in just a bit.
Cool.
Can you move to the next one, please?
Yes, I will give you the mouse so you can control the slides.
That's
I think
awesome.
that's the easiest way to arrange that.
Can I? Yeah, that's great.
There we go.
All right.
Maybe we should move the thing to the side. Yeah.
So like this. Okay.
Quickly in between, I saw some people responding in chat that the giveaway link wasn't working. I think Ja is fixing that right now. So there should be a new link very soon, and that one should be working to participate in the giveaway. So please do so, and then
you guys
time to listen to Martijn to what you say.
Yeah, some nice. Be sure to fill it in. So yeah, Ryzen 3000 desktop processors, the next generation. I just want to get a few things out of the way first. We're also introducing the 3200G and the 3400G, which is a follow-up of the 2200G and the 2400G. This is Ryzen with Radeon graphics. This is not...
because I saw there was already a little bit confusion amongst people.
Yeah.
You had Ryzen 3000 and Ryzen 3000, but they're not the same.
No, you might remember from the past when we first launched Ryzen 1st Gen, that during almost 2nd Gen, we've launched Ryzen with Radeon graphics as well. I believe it was February last year. And we called those the 2000 series actually.
So they were 1000, but they were still the Zen 1 architecture.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
not Zen Plus yet.
So what's happened here is that this now has Zen Plus, so not Zen 2. However, we still made major improvements to these products as well. So the 3200G, for example, still 4-core and 4 threads. It's now got a higher CPU boost clock. It's got a higher graphics clock as well. And it comes with the Rate Stealth cooler still, all in a $99 US price. So that's really insane. And if you consider that it's also coming with a CPU cooler. So that's great. So for the 3400G, the Ryzen 5, what we've now done is we've also boosted that one higher. Also a higher VJ boost clock as well for the graphics core. But it now comes with the new Rate Spire cooler as well. So it's a 65 watt CPU, but it comes with a 95 watt CPU cooler. So you can actually have more performance benefits from that through PBO, automatic overclocking, which we'll discuss a little bit more about later, but also from manual overclocking. So we're giving you options and headroom for your standard box cooler to be an enthusiast with and try to experiment, getting higher clocks and getting most out of it. And of course, for that you also need great TIM. So that's why we have solder TIM this generation on the Ryzen 5 3400G as well. So what does this do in terms of benchmarking? Well, let's look at the graphics side of things, because next to the CPU, this is one of the most important factors for this APU, of course.
Yeah. So that's why you buy this kind of CPU, right?
Exactly.
Because you want to have strong graphics within your CPU if you don't want to use a dedicated graphics card.
Exactly. If you're an occasional gamer, or if you want to use this as your HD PC or multimedia solution, this is actually great stuff. So as you can see, a few of those games are really running great, and we take the benchmark at least 30 FPS because this is the bare minimum we want to run at. And you can see that we're clearly beating, our competitor, the i5 9400 here. So even in some games, we might reach 75, 80, maybe 90 FPS still from an integrated GPU, which is a great testament of technical ingenuity, of course.
And also for example, esports games, they're usually not as demanding as AAA titles.
Yeah.
So if you only play esports games, this can also be a really interesting.
Yeah, if you play Fortnite, Counter-Strike, for example, those types of games really run great on Ryzen with Radeon graphics. So it's a perfect choice for that as well. So moving up. Actually, what we're mostly going to talk about today.
And this is where everyone has been waiting for.
Yeah, it's the 7 nanometer.
The hype was real.
The hype was real. Yeah, well, before this hype, got real, of course, we already committed a few years ago. So about 5 years ago, we made big bets to get the high performance leadership. And what we've done is with TSMC, we've made sure to finalize the 7 nanometer process technology and implement those in Zen 2 and RDNA, so our new Navi cards as well. So next to that, for Ryzen 3rd Gen, we are also introducing our chiplet architecture, which helps us, get higher performance from the CPU, but also from the memory side of things. So let's dive into that a little bit as well. So just to get it clear, we were launching in 2017, we were launching Zen and Zen Plus. Zen 2 has now been launched, and you guys really are showing your demand for it, because it's probably hard to get the 9 or the 7 at this point, but stick with us, guys. We're working around the clock to get more available as soon as possible. So it's been great reception. Thank you for that.
So the 14 nanometer first generation Zen.
14 nanometer, yeah, and Zen Plus was a 12.
So that's the 2000 series.
Correct.
And now 3000 series all the way down to 7 nanometer.
Yeah, the 3rd gen in the 3000 series are now 7 nanometer. This is Zen 2 just launched. And for Zen 3, we're already working on it. So it's on track. So it's already nice to know about that as well. So what does 7 nanometer give us? So it drives significant compute efficiency. Excuse me. So 2 times the density within the cores, half the power, or if you translate this to performance, 25% more performance per watt, which is great, of course. So this is where a lot of the good stuff you see in your reviews come to life. So for single-threaded performance, because we were already multi-threaded king, as you probably know, in workstation-related or content creation tools, Ryzen was already a king in
and those. Also due to that, every CPU in the Ryzen series has simultaneous multi-threading.
Correct.
So you always have double the amount of threads available of the actual cores that are in the CPU.
Yeah, for those without the Vega graphics at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So we're also now focused, with your feedback, of course, also on the single-threaded side of things. So what we've done, if we look at the Cinebench core, for example, here, is that 3rd gen allows us for a 21% increase in delivered performance, and this is a 3900X. So what does it show on the right side? It actually means this 21% comes from 60% IPC. So this is technical engineering, architectural changes from the Ryzen 3rd generation processors. And 40% comes from the 7 nanometer process technology. So if you add that up, you get 21% more performance. So how does this look in terms of cooler and quieter PC? Well, because of we're shrinking the die basically, it allows us to use less power to generate the same or more performance even. So if you compare this in Cinebench, for example, the 3700X to a Core i7 9700K, you'll see that our
8-core CPUs.
8-core CPU and ours has 16 threads. You'll see that our absolute energy efficiency is 56%.
Just in between question in chat, do any of your boards have a BIOS reset button? Yes, depends per model if you have it. But yes, some of our boards do have a BIOS reset button.
Is that the clear CMOS or is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Clear CMOS. Some have it on the back, a button on the I/O where you can easily, you don't have to access your case. Easily on the back of your PC, you can reset your button.
And I think MSI motherboards are quite forgiving if you screw up an overclock, right, or something. Then it will automatically, after a few boot loops, it will show you that the overclock has been.
They're quite forgiving, but still, if you want to easily reset it, you can just press the button.
Yeah, sorry guys. So great question, by the way. But
so also, if you have questions about the architecture to Martijn, please drop them in chat, and
I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, sure. That's what I'm here for today. So going back to a cooler and quieter PC, because we also care about sound. As a gamer, you don't want any background noise from heavy loading of fans or heavy high-speed fans. So we're with 7 nanometer and with these architectural changes, we're actually 56% more energy efficient. Which means if you translate this to raw absolute wall power compared to the i7 9700K, we're now 139 watts during Cinebench compared to 157 watts of our competitor. So it's a testament not only into performance but also about power efficiency in this generation.
A question: which GPU is used for those results, AMD or NVIDIA? Well, I think the only graphic results we had was the APU, so that was actually the graphics part integrated in the CPU.
Yeah,
so no
Vega
separate,
graphics.
No dedicated graphics card used there.
Yeah, it was Vega 11, I believe, from the top of my head, from the 3400G. So yeah. So we haven't showed any benchmarks yet with dedicated GPUs, right?
No, we will show them later on. Yeah. And, so you can also see the gaming performance of 3rd gen Ryzen in combination with a dedicated GPU.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, if you win a Steam wallet code, how will you claim it? We will email it to you. And then with the instructions where you can redeem the code in Steam, and then it will be added to your wallet.
Yeah. So here we have the full stack, and as you can see at the bottom.
So that's a lot of CPUs.
Yeah, that's the 3000 series right there, and you see the 3200G and the 3400G with this performance boost, from the boost clock and the base clock as well.
So the Zen Plus architecture CPUs with the Vega graphics.
Correct, 12 nanometer with Vega graphics now, but still on PCI-Express Gen 3, of course. Yeah. Because 3rd gen Ryzen are the only CPUs in this world currently doing PCI-Express Gen 4.
So this also because they're still Zen Plus architecture and not Zen 2 yet.
Correct.
They still have.
Yeah. PCI-Express Gen 4 is part of Zen 2. Yeah. Correct. So and if we move to the first Ryzen 5 3600, the first 7 nanometer CPU, which I brought, by the way, it's a beautiful thing. I guess it's where a lot of bang for buck is.
Can show it up close.
Can we show it?
Camera here.
Have a camera?
Yeah.
All right. The 3600, which is a great bang for buck CPU, of course, and a lot of you guys, this is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU.
I know, it's easy to read, but
it basically delivers all you would wish for if you're building, let's say, an entry-level gaming system or a mid-range gaming system. This is a great CPU for that as well. So if we move back to the stack, because this is a 65, top of my head, 65 watt part. We also have a 3600X, which has a slightly higher boost clock and a slightly higher base clock. So still 6 cores, 12 threads. But as you can see, we have AMD game cache on this, and I will dive into that a little bit later. But this means we have 35 megabytes of cache compared to the 6.
So that's a huge bump up compared to the Ryzen 2000 series.
Yeah, we doubled the cache on these CPUs because we saw better performance in games from doubling the cache. So but I have a few slides on that as well. Moving up the stack, we of course have the 3700X, 8-core, 16-thread part. All of those have PCI Gen4, as I mentioned. And of course the 3800X, also an 8-core, 16-thread part with slightly higher base clock and slightly higher boost clock. And the one I brought here, the current top of the stack, is the Ryzen 9 3900X, 12-core, 24 threads, up to 4.6 boost clock with a 70 megabyte cache included.
So that's new for mainstream platform, because up till now, 8 physical cores was the maximum on the mainstream platform, and of course with high-end desktop platform like Threadripper, you could get further than that. But now on AM4, you can go up to 12 cores already.
Yes.
And
first 12-core processor on the mainstream platform.
In September already up to 16 cores.
Yeah. We'll show you a little bit more about that as well. Yeah. So this is the full stack, and as you can see on the right side, it's comparing it to our competitor CPUs, which in most cases don't have multi-threading, for example. So this is basically not just because of the new future-proofing with PCI Gen4, but also with the sheer amount of cores and threads you'll get with AMD, with Ryzen 3rd Gen. It's a clear win in most cases.
There's some questions in chat. Apshi Shek, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, is asking, I saw active fan on X570 board. Do you think there's a chance for a vapor chamber on motherboards? Even if that's expensive, tell us about X570 chipset. Later on in the stream, we'll tell you more about the motherboards with X570 chipset, also the cooling on them. So we'll get back to that. BitGamer X is asking, does MSI motherboard support BIOS update without a processor? If your motherboard has the flash BIOS button, which is available on most of our 400 and 500 series motherboards, then yes. You can simply plug in your power supply, a USB key with the right BIOS file, you press the button and it will automatically flash your BIOS without installing a CPU, without installing memory, without installing a graphics card, etc. Iceklont is asking, how many PCI-Express lanes do they have? So the third gen Ryzen
I have a slide on that as well. We're up to 44 and 36 top of my head, but I'll pop up the slide just in a bit, and we can show you more also about how you can connect this to USB ports, for example, which is up to motherboard manufacturers, of course, how to utilize those PCI lanes. But we're bringing a record number of PCI lanes to a mainstream platform, which is obviously great. So next to more cores and higher boost clocks, etc., latest in technology, we're also bringing more connectivity, better I/O. So yeah, it's game changing in that as well. So here you can see a little bit about the more performance difference between the previous generation, so Ryzen 7 2700X, 7 Plus, 12 nanometer compared to the 7 nanometer parts. And you'll see the Ryzen 5 3600 is already beating it. So it's in terms of 7 nanometer, but also in terms of the product stack. You'll see that the 3600 this generation is already beating the 2700 from the previous one.
So this is the increase due to the new architecture and the 7 nanometer
7 nanometer, the new architecture, and of course increase in base and boost clock as well.
Yeah.
So this is all things considered, you know, product versus product in this case. So if you move up to the stack, you see the 3600X is up to 13% increase, 15% for the 3700X compared to the 2700X, and 19% for the 3800X. But, you know, as you can see, it makes sense to upgrade. So if you want more single-threaded performance, if you want more multi-threaded performance, it makes sense to buy a higher-end CPU, even in a mainstream platform.
And that's due to the higher clock speeds that it keeps increasing.
Yeah, exactly. So 3900X up to 21%. So this is where the 21% came from in the previous slides, and which I think we can unbox it now, right?
I think that's a good idea.
Let's do it. All right. I'll see if
I will just
find a key.
Get the camera towards you. Let me see.
Yeah, let's take a little bit of a round tour. So if you can see it.
If it's stable like that.
It's, you know, a nice slogan. Built to perform, designed to win, which has been the case each generation. It's sitting right here, actually, so you can see it at the top. Not sure about the lighting. Yeah, that's it. Sitting right here, waiting for me to unbox it. So let's just open this bad boy up, and you need to get a key first.
It's still factory sealed.
Factory sealed, brand new. So here it is. So you open up the box, and this is what you see inside the CPU itself. If you pull it out, you can pull it out of the small thing if you want. Michiel?
Sorry?
You can pull the CPU out this one.
Let me just
you can
get
keep
the
it.
camera here.
Okay. Joint effort here, man.
Yeah.
Got to put in some work.
So this is the 12-core unit. And, well, I know Threadripper. I've worked with Threadripper. And I also held the 12-core Threadripper. But that was a lot bigger than this one.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's partly due to 7 nanometer,
7 nanometer, yeah,
so
exactly.
you can put more cores on a smaller surface.
Yep. And it allows for a lot more good stuff coming to the mainstream market as well.
This must be nice to put in your case.
Yeah, of course. You're proud of the Ryzen 9, right?
Cool.
So yeah, let's move back to this. Oh, you can unpack it basically if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's okay.
So
I've done several, so
let's open this
let's
up.
see what's inside. I already saw somebody in the chat.
I really like
He has
these.
an idea what's inside, so.
The cooler.
Yep.
And this is a lot different from the cooler we talked about before. You had the Spire cooler.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you can explain what's different about this one, because we can already see.
Yeah.
That's a different category.
Yeah, exactly. This is the Raid Prism cooler. It comes with RGB out of the box.
So that's the ring right
the
here
ring,
around,
yeah,
and in the fan as well, right?
Exactly. And what it now also has is it has Razer Chroma support. So if you're using Razer products, you can sync your colors with Razer products, but you can also use it for in-game display of what you see on the screen is displayed in the color of your cooler and the rest of your components. So it's now got support for that as well. It also has support for Mystic Light.
Yeah, so you can sync it up with your motherboard. If you have a motherboard with Mystic Light support, you can easily sync all the lighting up and all the attached components to your motherboard with your CPU cooler.
Yeah, just using one piece of software, which is great actually, because
And here on the side, I see a small switch.
Yeah.
So that's for the fan speed, I think.
I think it is, yeah.
It says low and high.
Yeah. I can't see it on the camera, but no, it's that switch. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and this is plenty of cooling in a box, you get with the CPU. And remember, most of us from the competitor don't come with a CPU cooler. And this even allows for manual overclocking as well. So there's still some headroom left on this CPU cooler.
And also because of new technologies, CPU cooling is more and more important, because now it translates to more performance.
Exactly. With Precision Boost Overdrive, you now get more performance, and actually your enthusiasm gets rewarded. So if you build a high-end system, you get a decent cooler on it, like one out of the box here, for example, or you go for a liquid cooling solution, you'll be rewarded with higher boost clocks, but also with more headroom for manual overclocking, of course, which is due to the performance Precision Boost Overdrive as well.
Top.
Yeah, I have the top. Sorry. So let me put it back. So, and I have some info about that. So if you can go back to the presentation. So yeah, we talked about the performance increase. We showed you the 3900 for a bit. So I want to go into the game cache bit first, before I go back to the PCI lanes, because I noticed in the chat there were several questions on that. Bear with us, guys. I've got some info on that as well. But for the AMD game cache, and we call this game cache because we saw the performance benefit in games when we doubled the cache.
So this is specifically for gaming benefit, or do you also see this in, for example,
no, obviously it's doubling the cache, so you see it everywhere when you run benchmarks or several applications.
But the real change is in gaming.
No, let's say the most changes in gaming, yeah.
Because you call it game cache.
Yeah, because the most benefit we see in there. And what it actually does, it reduces the effective memory latency by up to 33 nanoseconds. And this is actually more than higher memory frequency itself. Higher memory frequency also reduces latency. But what we saw from game cache is that we, by adding more and more cache, we saw the drop in nanoseconds significantly compared to higher memory frequency. So it made sense to invest in that. And it actually drives up to 21% higher gaming performance. As you can see in the chart right there, CSGO, if you add up like 21%,
getting a lot of questions in chat about 300 and 400 series motherboard and the support for 3rd gen Ryzen.
Yeah.
We will extensively talk about this later, so stay tuned.
And
we also have
some stuff about it.
Yeah,
right?
we have more information about that, and we also have very cool blog posts that I will refer you to later, where you can still read all the information about if you have such a motherboard, if it is supported, what you should do to to have it work with 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to that.
Yeah, I already saw like a B450 Tomahawk somewhere with a 3900X, I believe, or 3700X. I'm not sure, but
yeah, you can make a lot of combinations.
I saw some enthusiasts already trying everything out to see if it's working and if they even could do some manual overclocking on that. So that's a nice
with
testament
fine
to that
tuning,
board.
you can do a lot of things.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, to conclude the story about game cache, you see an immediate benefit in games. So we found this and we thought like, hey, with the die shrinkage, with everything going on, we can implement this. We can make sure that we add more cache and give gamers what they really want. So we're catching up and sometimes even beating our competitor now in games as well.
We have a very good question from Ivan. He's asking, is the Precision Boost overdrive 200 megahertz fixed? Can we go back a little bit higher in the chat? Yeah. Fixed, or will that never work on Ryzen CPUs?
No, it depends on the cooling, like the thermals. You can set it automatically or you can manually tune it. So it's PBO limits, actually. You can manually tune that either to go 100, 200, or 300, for example. If your thermals allows it, if your voltage allow it, for example, and if your motherboard is capable of doing so, it will deliver that, depending, of course, on the silicon lottery of your CPU. Because with overclocking, there is no guarantee.
It essentially means that one CPU will always overclock slightly better or worse than the other one.
It's always the case. It has always been the case in our business.
Yeah.
Ever since we started X86 and X64, of course, all those instructions. Silicon matters. So the quality of the CPU, it matters. And it all depends on which part you're getting. But we're guaranteeing the boost clocks and the base clocks. And everything above that is nice to take away. And it's for you guys to find out.
You still can get some free performance.
Sure. Yeah. And it's for you guys to find out and do some manual overclocking. Which has always been one of my favorite things to do whenever I bought new hardware. So go and try. Yeah, great question, by the way. Thanks.
You see, we have some more questions. Zen 2 packs a lot of power. Compared to Zen 1, is there serious change in design or fabrication process to tackle latency? Yeah, so that's also partly the game cache.
Yeah, and also the Infinity Fabric. It's the Infinity Fabric has been improved because of PCI Gen4 as well. So it's all going through PCI Gen4 lanes, which I'll show you a little bit more about later as well, about the architecture and how does everything connect to each other through those PCI lanes. That improves as well. So what we've now done, we've worked with TSMC to have the 7 nanometer dies in the chiplet design, and we still have the 12 nanometer I/O die, which has all the USB and IMC stuff going on in a separate die. This allowed us to make those architectural improvements. And
so that's why, for example, on Ryzen 9, you see the 3 chips.
Yeah, you see 3 chips from anything that's 12 core and up. So up to 8 core, it has a single die and a single I/O die. So a single CPU die.
So that's only for the Ryzen 9. You have the 2 chips for the cores.
Exactly.
So up to 8 cores per chip.
Yep.
So the Ryzen 7 has one of those chips and Ryzen 5 as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And those are 7 nanometer and the I/O is?
The I/O is 12 nanometer because we saw there was no real benefit in shrinking that, and it only made our production more complicated. So now we have the full focus with 7 nanometer on the CPU dies, and we could focus on that more and make sure that we deliver on that as much as we can, because the demand has been great. And like I mentioned, bear with us, we're working around the clock to get more and more available soon. But by doing that, we've not also managed to have the package power lower, because we didn't see much benefits from shrinking the I/O part of it. But we've also made sure that the overclocking is now also been improved a little bit in terms of CPU speeds, and then in terms of memory speed as well. So not the overclocking, sorry, but the standard base clock and the turbo boost.
Yeah. Crimson Leader is asking, is it better to get lower cache latency on your memory or a higher frequency like 4000 megahertz with CL18 for RAM?
That's a great question, and actually I have some more information on that as well. There is some sort of sweet spot, which I'll talk to you a bit about later.
And that's also due to the architecture.
It's due to the architecture, and bear in mind that this is a new fabrication, so we're the first company to explore 7 nanometer on a CPU architecture. And this is a totally new internal memory controller as well, or IMC. So it has some challenges, and with the Infinity Fabric in place, of course, at some point, you're gonna run into limits. We're learning from this, so you might see improvements next generation on this as well. However, I cannot discuss this at this point because we're talking Zen 2 today. But you'll see that at some point, we make great improvements on memory speed and memory support as well, and we give options for those who want to go higher memory frequency, but there is a little bit of a divider in place at some point, which I'll show you a little bit later. But maybe we can go back to the presentation. So
a very good question in relation to the game cache. BitGamer X is asking, is game cache something that needs to be enabled? Do you need to enable that manually?
No,
or is
it's
it
already enabled hardware-wise in the product, so you don't need.
So nothing you need to do.
No, just make sure you have the latest chipset driver, you have the latest motherboard BIOS, etc., to support, Ryzen 3rd Gen to the fullest with optimal settings, and you're good to go. You don't have to manually do anything about this. You'll just get this performance out of the box. Yeah. So talking about memory latency, like I mentioned, we're the first company exploring 7 nanometer. And what we saw is that we have a one-to-one mode with the Infinity Fabric, so where the I/O dies are actually communicating with each other, the I/O and the CPU dies.
So that's like the 2 chips on the CPU.
Yeah.
You have the cores on one side and the I/O die on the other side, and the communication between those two.
Constantly communicating back and forth, and we have Infinity Fabric for this. In this generation, the Infinity Fabric has allowed us to have higher memory speeds as well. Obviously, switching to PCI Gen4 too. So what we see now is that we have a one-to-one mode, which runs one-to-one to the Infinity Fabric, up to 3600, or in some cases, depending on the CPU you get, like Silicon Lottery, 37, 33, or sometimes even 3800, which it runs at a one-to-one mode. So this is where your lowest latency actually comes into play. So what we see, I think you agree, Michiel, is that 3600 is like the sweet spot nowadays. If you look at price performance, I think you get, for $100, you can get 16 gigs of 3600 C16.
Yeah, memory got quite a lot cheaper, and especially the bit faster modules. So if you go like 3400, 3600, they're quite affordable nowadays.
Yeah.
And with the 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs, you see that you have like a steep growth in performance up to around 3600, 3700 megahertz, and then it declines. So then you still have a little bit of performance gain, but it will be way slower, and the price will increase way faster.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really make sense to buy extremely fast memory performance-wise. Of course, it's really nice if you're an overclocker.
You see diminishing returns. If you're an extreme overclocker, you'll see some benefits in benchmarks, like Geekbench or 3D Mark, for example.
So if you want to set records, sure, but for general usage, and if you want price performance, then I think 3600 is really the sweet spot for 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs.
Exactly, and this is where the most performance comes from. So what you'll see is a 3600 C16 is actually one of the greatest kits to have in terms of, like you mentioned, price performance.
Yeah, it used to be really expensive, but nowadays...
Yeah, it's perfect. It's a great timing.
Good combination.
Yeah, it's great. So what we also notice is that still some people wanted higher memory clocks, and this is like feedback from 1st gen Ryzen ever back. So what we like to give options. So at AMD, we like to give options similar to the several products in the stack, of course, but also about these kind of things. So for your enthusiasm, you can go higher in memory speeds. So if you want to go, I believe you have already broken records for several motherboards with these kits.
It can go fast,
on Ryzen 3rd Gen, above 5000, that's all. But if you want to go, let's say, buy a 4200 kit because you care about this single application which benefits more from higher memory frequency instead of lower latency, or it doesn't have that real deficit of the two decoupling mode, so it runs 2-to-1 with the Infinity Fabric over 3600 or 3733. If you see benefits from higher memory, you can go out and purchase this. I mean, that's your choice. So we're giving you a choice. And that's why we want to explain this a little bit. But you can do XMP for a 4200 kit with ease, just one click. Yeah.
Clear story.
Right. Do we have any more questions you want to do first, or?
Let me see. Ivan's asking, what about CL14 3600 megahertz versus CL16 3600 megahertz? Will there be a big difference?
Big depends on the games you play, on the applications you run, of course. You have to test it, but there's always a benefit. Yeah, but there's always a benefit from lower latency, especially when you're in one-to-one mode, of course. If you find that kit that you have that's gonna do one-to-one ratio, like a 3600 kit with the lowest cache latency possible, obviously you'll see more and better results and more FPS in your games. However, it's always a choice. Is this price performance thing, is this affecting me, or do I want to spend and go all out on this kit? and buy the most extreme kit available. You know, and this is all up to you.
And it also really depends on what you do on it. In some situations, you will barely see a difference. In other situations, it can make quite a big difference.
Yeah.
For gaming, it can differ from game to game even. So it's hard to get
a 3600 C16 kit is great for whatever you do, and it's I think if you go like C15 or C14. Probably your graphics card, but your graphics card is first the bottleneck in any game first, unless you play a 1024, 786, or 768 resolution.
Exactly.
But if you play like Full HD or 1440p, your graphics card is going to end up being the bottleneck first before this kit does. So a 3600 C16 is actually the one we prefer to give you guys as the preferred kit at this point, price performance wise.
Talking about price, let's give away a prize.
All right.
Because we're still running our giveaway. So if you haven't participated yet, go to msi.com/2/insider. There you can participate in our giveaway. If you cannot see the link there, Ja will also put the link in chat so you can directly participate through Gleam. In the giveaway, you will see certain actions you can perform. The more actions you perform, the bigger chance you will have to win. So perform as many as possible and increase your chances. And you will have a chance to win one of the $20 value Steam codes.
Can I take a 5-minute break to fill in all those things? Just now?
If you can do it in half a minute, then we're good.
I'll do it another time. Following later. Yeah, that's all right.
Next week we have a new live stream, new giveaway.
All right.
Then you have your chance.
Yeah. Great.
So let's see. Then we'll draw our first winner.
Oh, okay. We're doing live draw.
Yeah.
That's great.
Definitely.
That's great.
So the moment of truth.
He's drawing.
And the first winner.
A lot of entries.
Is a lot of entries already. Let me see. The first winner is I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, but Justine Hodgkinson.
Yeah.
Congratulations! You won the first $20 Steam codes. We have way more to give away, so please participate if you haven't done so yet. If you already participated, you will automatically be enrolled for the next draw as well. So then you're good.
Congratulations, Justine.
Yeah, congratulations.
Enjoy your games. Yeah, great.
And hopefully on a 3rd gen Ryzen, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you get your hands on one at this point. Yep. So let's go back.
We can already see some people recognizing you. Hey, Martijn, nice to see you again. Missed the live streams featuring you. Well, now you don't have to miss him anymore because he's back.
Thank you very much. I feel so honored with these comments,
and
guys.
I'm sure we will see him more in the future in other AMD live streams.
Oh yeah, I'll try to be more because I love this. You know, this is great.
So prepare for more, Martijn.
Yeah. Thank you guys, great comments. I think all the questions regarding memory speed and latency and decoupling mode have been answered. So let's move on to the next one. Yeah, and that's actually the platform. So we talked about the CPU, we talked about 7 nanometer, PCI Gen4, but it also comes on the AM4 platform, which means you can still use your X470 motherboard or your B450 to run 3rd gen Ryzen. And of course, X570 is now here, enabling PCI-Express Gen4 for you, but a lot of other cool stuff as well. Before Michiel is going to talk about X570 and the other cool stuff that's coming, let's dive into the AM4 platform just a little bit, because I want to remind you guys that AM4 is still the most flexible platform out there for gamers. So we have 150 plus motherboards available right now. It's incredibly scalable, like I mentioned, backwards compatible, but it's also highly customizable. So you can have exclusive tweaking and tuning software as well, and options from the motherboard BIOS or other overclocking options as well. Ryzen Master, of course, has also been updated to support Ryzen 3rd gen. So it's great throughout the whole stack, and whatever motherboard you choose, you still get tuning options for that as well. So diving into the platform, next to the hardware part, we also work closely with Microsoft. Because we saw, especially on the 1st generation Ryzen, there was still some work to do before all those threads get recognized, the way our core structure has been built.
So you can build the hardware, but if the software doesn't utilize the hardware, then it's useless.
Yeah, or not optimized to use it fully. Exactly. Yeah, at this point. So what we've done is we've closely worked with Microsoft and made sure that even if you're running a Ryzen 1st gen or a Zen Plus part, like the 2000 series Ryzen, you still get optimizations from Microsoft Windows 10 as well. So it's now optimized for Zen. And on the left side, you can see that it's now been optimized for topology awareness. And this has actually already been included in the Windows 10 May update, which means that each die has 2 CCXs. So
this sounds very complicated.
It's very
topology awareness.
I will not go into too much detail. But what it means is that internally, resources have been asked from a certain application to perform, let's say, some demands, right, for calculations. So what Microsoft, because of all the threads available, it was hard sometimes to allocate the right CCX to the same application or the same demand. So sometimes there were 2 workers working on 2 requests for one application.
So it's pretty much how Windows divides the tasks towards the cores.
Exactly. So what we've now done is we first fill up a CCX with all the workload we can handle, and then move on to the next one. So with applications either being in the same CCX or being in the CCX next to that, really reduces latency and responsiveness of your request. So you have a faster processing going on right there through the software optimization. So this is available for all Zen.
More efficiently, basically.
More efficiently, yeah. It's, and actually taking full benefit of the Zen architecture now for the first time, basically from Windows. So, and on the right side, you see for 3rd generation Ryzen is that we've improved the Ryzen clock selection. And what this basically means is that you have a more responsive system. So you'll have differences between idle CPU speed and load CPU speed. And typically, I hate to go to car comparisons, but what happens is when you put your foot down on the gas pedal in your car, you'll immediately want it to go faster, right? So this is what we've improved for Ryzen. So it immediately ramps up the idle speed to boost clocks or base clock, depending on the thermals, etc., to give you a much more responsive system and much higher performance within a few less milliseconds. So
Merrick
we went from 30.
In chat, so in other words, it works more like a thread ripper. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good comparison, I guess. And
I think it's what we see with more things, because Precision Boost Overdrive is also something that you first introduced on the Threadripper platform.
We used XFR, right?
Exactly,
on
and now also bringing those technologies to the mainstream platform.
Yeah, we got to closely work together because we're introducing more and more cores and more threads each generation. So obviously the software needs to be aligned with that, and that's why AMD and Microsoft have a really good relationship, and now you'll see more and more benefits come to fruition because of this relationship. And there's always some improvement to be had over time, but this time at launch we wanted to immediately give you already a big improvement on your responsiveness of the system.
Five is asking in chat, will the next live stream be about Navi? At the end of this live stream we will announce the next one, so then we will unleash where that's going to be about.
So yeah, you have to sit it out, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, some more questions about support on previous generation motherboards. We will talk about that extensively later and give you all the information you need if you have one of those motherboards.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Yeah, so on the left side, this is available for all Zen from the Windows 10 update. I guess almost everybody has been updated by now. Should be at least. Or you force it because you're missing out on some performance optimization.
Yeah, so if you're blocking all your Windows updates, then you cannot benefit from this.
No, exactly. We're recommending you guys to always run the latest, of course.
And we know the updates always come in the wrong moment. At least for me, they do. If you're in a hurry and you want to shut down your PC, it starts to update.
Yeah. Just leave it on, walk away, man. Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's nowadays.
And then I'll go to bed later and see, it's finished. And then
it's just a bit more difficult on your notebook.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to put it in your bag and still install it.
Exactly, yeah, I understand. Yeah, so on the faster clock ramping is something really great, which you'll see immediately when once you install Ryzen 3rd Gen. It feels so responsive, so snappy. That's something like, that's where you first see the generational change. Before you even fired up a game or whatever you did, you will immediately notice that it's also really responsive. So that's great. So let's move on to the I/O part, because we had several questions about this, about the number of PCI lanes. So I guess this is the slide that several people have been asking for. So what's new? It's the most connected platform for enthusiasts. So if you're a content creator or workstation, this is a great platform as well, because you have multiple USB ports. So it's all up to the motherboard vendors how to implement it, but we're giving everybody the tools to utilize this to the fullest.
So this is what's theoretically possible, and then we can pick and mix what we want for which model.
Yeah, and I think you have some information on that as well, right? Later
Definitely,
on. Yeah, so then you can see differences between how motherboard manufacturers actually choose to do certain configurations for higher end and certain configurations for a more affordable motherboard, for example. But as you can see, it's super speed, USB 10 gigabit per second. We are delivering from the chipset up to 8 lanes. From the Ryzen processor, it's also up to 4. So it means in total socket AM4, you'll get up to 12 I/O lanes now for USB 10 gigabit per second, where our competitor on Z390 actually does only 6.
So for people who are wondering what USB 10 gigabit per second is, that's nowadays it's called USB 3.2 Gen 2.
I'm hiding.
It can get a little bit complicated, but that's what used to be 3.1 Gen 2.
Yeah.
And now it's 3.2 Gen 2, but essentially it means it's USB at 10 gigabits per second.
Yeah. Correct. Let's not go into too much detail about
it. No, it can be really confusing, but it means it's fast USB.
It means we have the latest and greatest in USB, and that's the most important one. So high-speed USB, we're also supporting, of course, from the X570 chipset up to 4 lanes, which is the same as our competitor. But then SATA comes in 6 gigabit per second. We're actually supporting 12 from the AM4 from the X570 chipset, 2 from the Ryzen processor as well. So up to 14 SATA 6 gigabit per second lanes compared to 8 from our competitor. So if you see what we support in terms of PCI Gen4, well, obviously we have 16 from the chipset. We have 24 from the Ryzen processor. So this has never been done before.
So why would you still need SATA if you have this?
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Because this is where it gets really fast.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll demonstrate this later, but it's a big increase.
Yeah, so and this all boils down to what we offer in the total I/O is a 36 is usable from the 44, because we have Infinity Fabric also as well connected to internal lanes, so which are used, so we cannot use them for anything else for the motherboard manufacturer. So usable are 36 at this point.
So a combination of the CPU and the chipset.
Exactly, and those are all PCIe Gen 4, PCI-Express Gen 4. So our competitor has nothing on that. So the latest and greatest in technology. So how does this look in terms of, if you want a diagram of this, the processor and what we're aiming to deliver. We have 5 times the peripheral bandwidth, because obviously running on PCI Gen 4 gives faster performance, where it's USB. So even though you have no SATA, no PCI Gen 4 SSD at that point, you still benefit from faster USB speeds, for example. 8 gigabit per second from the CPU to the X570 chipset, and of course storage up to 8 gigabit per second as well, PCI Gen 4. Moving to the right side, you'll see the 32 gigabit per second for the graphics bandwidth, which is doubled compared to the PCI-Express Gen 3.
Sometimes that's a bit confusing, because you might know 64 gigabyte per second for graphics, but that's because it can communicate with each other, so it goes both sides. So if you do it times 2, for 64. Each side one, it's 64.
Yeah.
So sometimes you see different figures, but that's why sometimes you see 32 gigabyte per second and sometimes 64. Neither of them is right or wrong.
The takeaway here is it's doubled the speed.
Exactly.
From PCI Gen 3 to PCI Gen 4, which is obviously important. And in the middle, you see the Ryzen CPU, the Ryzen 9, for example, 2 chiplets and an I/O die.
Yeah.
So
here you can indeed clearly see how the CPU is built up.
Yeah, exactly. So that's 12 core and up. So to take advantage of PCI Gen 4, obviously you need devices to fully enjoy it. So with SSDs, you get a snappier system, faster loading times, faster booting of your Windows, but also first in the server. In some games it still matters. Mm-hmm. If you're the first guy to spawn, you get the good equipment, for example. I'm not sure which games nowadays still do that, but
and faster data transfer also for content creators.
Yeah.
You have nowadays 4K video editing, even 8K video editing. And those files,
for content creators, this is opening a new world for them. Yeah, exactly. So we have several SSDs from our partners as well. But you guys also have add-on cards where you can add more M.2 SSDs on PCI Gen 4. So there's plenty of solutions to really benefit from faster SSD speeds as well. And those are available as of now. So my takeaway here is that the time has now come to upgrade. So if you guys, for example, have a system which has been about 3 years old and is equivalent to a i7 6700K and a GeForce GTX 1070, it might be time to upgrade. Why? Because at Ryzen 7 3700X and a Radeon RX 5700 XT Navi, you get up to 30, maybe even 40% more performance. And this is compared to this system. So if you're running anything below this system, you see much and much more performance.
This is actually really close to what I'm running right now. I'm running a 6600K and a 1070.
Then you should really upgrade, man. As an enthusiast, it's time.
Yeah, I'm looking to upgrade in the near future.
Yeah, but it's something to be really excited about. I mean, there's something really exciting, not just about the cores and threads, but also the possibility to really benefit in games from that as well. So
and nowadays also things like streaming are very popular, and then you need the combination of computing performance and the gaming performance. So there, especially the extra power really comes in handy to do things simultaneously.
Everybody's running stuff in the background nowadays. I mean, Discord and either Twitch or whatever you're doing in the background. There's Steam, Origin, you name it. It's running in the background. It's taking up resources. So this is where more cores and more threads also come in handy, but also where the Zen 2 architecture is really paying off, investing in that as well. So yeah, to take it away, I've also made a small summary for the Ryzen 7 3700X, and everything basically just got better. So what got better? Well, better gaming performance. We're now comparable or sometimes even beating Intel on gaming as well, single-threaded. Dominant
Josh
content
is making
creation.
Fun of my 6600K.
Yeah,
I know
that
it's
one's
time to
worthless.
upgrade. It's quite old nowadays.
Yeah.
I think it's 4 or 5 years old, something like that.
For an enthusiast, I'd expect better.
Yeah, it's time to upgrade.
Yeah, no, it's a dominant in content creation. It's the first to introduce PCI Gen 4 and the only company still doing it. It's AMD. The most and fastest connectivity is, obviously a result of that. It's easy overclocking. All of them are overclockable. So all the Ryzen parts this generation and previous generations are obviously overclockable. And now feature solder TIM. So all the Ryzen 3rd gen come with solder TIM, and the Ryzen 5 3400G with Radeon graphics, Vega graphics also comes with solder TIM. We have faster DDR4 memory compatibility and speeds. We have the AMD Raid Prism cooler with RGB LED. Comes on every on every Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 9 part nowadays, giving you some more headroom on the 3700X, for example, because it's a 95 watt cooler. So it gives you more headroom to overclock.
So 3700X and up all have the Raid Prism cooler.
Correct. Yeah. It's backwards compatible, so most scalable platform. It's on the AM4. It's still going strong. It's been great. It's an incredible ecosystem, from several motherboard manufacturers. We saw incredible motherboards, and I'm guessing you guys are gonna, make my eyes water too for all the things, and my mouth water, sorry, and my eyes water that I don't have one yet. And
there's a lot of water.
Yeah, there's a lot of water, so I might need to drink more. Maybe a tip for something. We have enhanced security features, so you might have read about all the stuff that's going on with security. These are, hardware protected against those as well. We're not affected by most of them, and the ones that we have affection on, which was taken care of on the hardware limit as well. And most of all, this 3700X is actually competitive or comparable to the i9 9900K, and all in a 65 watt part at a $329 or a €350 mark.
Yeah,
I guess
like that.
Something like that.
Frost Magic is asking, what's the real power difference between the Ryzen 7, the new Ryzen 7, and the new Ryzen 9? I actually have some media benchmarks later on, and they will give you a clear overview of different situations,
Correct.
How they compare to each other.
Yeah, remember this is TDP, so in the end, you of course see some difference. If you do manual overclocking, you go over 65 watt if you want.
And for example, precision boost, overdrive, stuff like that.
And if you add in all those factors, you obviously can go over TDP. But if you leave everything in stock, it should deliver similar to this, but it's measured in TDP. So that's also.
So if you go over it, that's also where really the VRM and the cooling and stuff like that comes into place.
Yeah, and that's why X570, not only for the latest and greatest in technology, but also for a more beefier VRM. Helps when you guys start manually overclocking and getting more in depth about exploring the limits of your processor and what you've got. You'll need a beefier VRM design and a great motherboard to go with it as well. So I'm guessing that's my part for now. Oh wait, I still had something left.
Yeah, you had.
Yeah. So if you guys are still not satisfied and waiting for more raw performance,
I only have a 12 core in my hand.
Only.
But
All right, that's how you're gonna play it. Okay.
But that's not it.
No. In September, we're also announcing. We already announced, but it's coming in September. The first 16-core, 32-thread mainstream desktop processor. And it's even got a higher boost clock, and it's gonna be a game changer once again. And all in 105 watt TDP. Can you imagine from a 16-core, 32 threads at 105 watts
And
in
also,
a mainstream desktop?
And even the size of the CPU. Like, if you compare this to a Threadripper, how small it is, and it fits 16 cores.
Safe to say we're really excited about Ryzen 3rd Gen.
And double the cores compared to the 2nd generation Ryzen processors.
Yeah, exactly.
So huge step up.
So thank you guys for all your feedback, all your questions in the chat. If you have more, keep coming. I mean, I'm still here. I'm eagerly awaiting what Michiel has to present and all the MSI goodies, good stuff that's going on. So keep them coming.
And
Thanks.
I think chat behaved so well that we're going to draw an honor winner.
Oh, really? Can I draw one? Can I press it?
And then you have to go there.
I go back.
Okay,
press
Martijn will draw another winner.
I will draw. Don't hate on me.
So in the meanwhile, if you haven't participated yet, go to msi.com/2/insider. There you can see the link to our Gleam giveaway. You can perform certain actions. The more you perform, the bigger chance you will have to win.
Where do I press?
In the meanwhile, Martijn is drawing our next winner.
You do the countdown, Michiel.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. And he's not done yet.
It's going to take some time.
Yeah, it's drawing. It's coming.
If you cannot see the link through the page, Ja will also post it in chat again, so you can directly go to giveaway
there it is.
Game,
Oh. Not yet.
and participate there.
Or is it? Yeah, it's drawing. Yeah.
Now we should have
I pressed
winner.
it 3 times. Are we gonna have 3 winners now?
Eventually we will. So our next winner, see nickname here is KKP. Congratulations. You won our second $20 Steam wallet code.
Congratulations.
We still have more to give away, so congratulations to this winner. If you haven't won yet, you still have the chance now.
Yep, during this whole stream.
Exactly. So if I can mouse back, let me just make a quick...
Want my CPU back, man.
The 12 core.
It's a good trade for me.
It definitely is.
Move this a little bit here. You want to show something, right? Later
Because I've been looking on the internet in the past couple of days. So Sunday, 7th of the 7th, 3rd Gen Ryzen got launched. And always after a product launch, the first thing is go up on the internet and see how it actually performs.
It's a dangerous place, man.
Yeah, it's a dangerous place. It's a very dark spot, the internet.
All right.
But I found some stuff where I'd like to go through. Because a really important thing for the 3rd generation Ryzen is the IPC. So the IPC is the instructions per cycle, and that essentially means how well a CPU can perform at a certain clock speed.
Correct.
So if you have 2 CPUs at the same speed and one will perform better than the other, then the IPC of one CPU is better than the other, simply said. So here we're comparing, I borrowed this from Hardware Info. They tested this with the Ryzen 7 2700X and the new Ryzen 7 3700X. They clocked both of them on 3.5 gigahertz to make sure they're equal. And they also clocked the memory both on 2933. So on the 3700X, of course, the default memory speed is 3200. So you get even better performance there. But for the sake of testing the IPC, they clocked it at 2933. Oh, Merrick is giving you a compliment about how well you're dressed.
Yeah, I forgot my AMD t-shirt, man. I'm sorry. I'm just too new. So I brought a blouse or a shirt instead. Yeah,
That looks good.
Oh, thanks.
So continuing, we see we have 2 benchmarks, Cinebench R15 single-threaded and Cinebench R15 multi-threaded. So the performance of 1 core and everything combined, essentially. And we see from 2700X to 3700X, a 12% performance increase on the single-threaded, and even a 15% increase on the multi-threaded. So maybe you can also explain, why do you see a difference here?
Well, obviously it's due to the fact that multi-thread has always been strong for AMD.
And also, is it better optimization that the increase there is even bigger than the single-threaded?
Well,
IPC
it's also
increase?
a focus from Zen 2 has been on single-threaded mostly, of course, architectural-wise. But to really answer that question, I'd have to dig deep, and I'll have to check with one of the engineers because obviously I'm not an engineer. So I can ask that if they have a proper answer on that as well. So I'll get back to that.
But at least one thing we know for sure, and that's a big increase comparing to second generation
We're delivering,
Ryzen.
man. Yeah, that's it.
And then if we're looking at the actual benchmarks, so this is from Tweakers. They did different synthetic benchmarks. So here we have Cinebench 20, both in single core and multi-core, so single-threaded, multi-threaded performance, and also the Blender testing. So these are really the synthetic benchmarks. So really the raw calculation performance that a CPU can offer. And you see them with a pink square around them. Those are the new Ryzen 9 3900X, which is 12-core CPU, and the Ryzen 7 3700X, which is an 8-core CPU. And they made a big step up compared to, because if you see the 2700X, that one was far behind the 3700X, so a huge step up, even though it's still an 8-core CPU, 16 threads, but a huge increase in performance generation on generation.
That's where the architecture comes in.
Yeah. And if I'm correct, the TDP of the 3700X is even lower than the 2700X.
Correct.
So at a lower power usage, you will have better performance.
Correct.
On the bottom right, we also have the CPU index for synthetic benchmarks. So that's essentially combining all the synthetic benchmarks into one score.
Oh, yeah.
And there we can also see the 12-core and the 8-core 3700X topping the chart here.
Yeah, looks good.
But this is just synthetically. So if we're going to look further, because this is very important, for example, content creators, they use a lot of computing power. So that's what you can really see in synthetic benchmarks. But it's quite different for gaming, and gaming also always has different needs.
Yeah.
So I went to KitGuru, and I got some results here from Grand Theft Auto in Full HD, and Far Cry 5 even in Quad HD at ultra settings. And we used to see in the first and second generation Ryzen, they were still a bit behind on the competitor, but now you're really closing the gap in games as well.
Yeah. Because
now we can see all of them are a lot higher, and you're getting really close even in gaming performance.
Comparable, yeah.
Yeah. And we also see here that for gaming usage, the benefit of more cores is still limited. Of course, that has to do with game engine optimization. So over time, of course, the Ryzen 9, for example, will have a bigger gap compared to Ryzen 5. Whereas at this point, if it's not perfectly optimized yet, you will still see they're quite similar in performance. But in the future, once optimization kicks in, that will be different.
And if you haven't done so, be sure to check your favorite reviewers' articles as well.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys have put in hours of work and testing, and it's been a pleasure to reading those and seeing what they found. And yeah, it's fun for any enthusiast to read all those reviews. I'm up to 24 right now. I tried real hard to read everything, and because we care about feedback as well. So if there's anything we can take away, and maybe next generation, we will gladly do it. But I mean, for any enthusiast, it should be great to read about these parts from your favorite review.
So Ryzen CPUs, they were already known for their computing power, and now you can see also for their gaming power, they're a really interesting option nowadays. But there's more, because you also have power usage. You already talked a little bit about it.
Correct.
So here we see also from KitGuru, they did a power consumption test. So that's the actual power consumption of the CPU. They did it with the 3700X on stock speeds, an overclocked 3700X, the 3900X, the Ryzen 9 on stock speeds, and also in overclocked. But they also did a performance per watt test. So essentially they calculate for each watt how much performance it provides you. So in the actual power consumption, you can see the 3700X is all the way at the top in this chart. So really low power consumption, while still offering a lot of raw power. And it seems like the 3900X is quite low in the chart, so the power consumption looks like it's really high. But if you look at the right, you can see the performance per watt. And then, of course, because it's a 12-core, it obviously draws more power because it has more cores, but it also gives you back the performance for that. So if you look at the performance per watt, the 3900X is actually all the way on top of the performance per watt chart. So huge steps compared to generation. Because this graph we can also see 1800X, which was the first generation Ryzen, still all the way at the bottom of the chart, and now the 3900X, the current top model, all the way on top of the chart. So a huge step up. And actually from 15.9 points on the 1800X to over 32 on the 3900X. So the third generation became a lot more efficient with
yeah, this has been our goal, right? I mean,
yeah.
This is the great things we get from 7 nanometer, but also these IPC improvements. And you got to give credit to all those great engineers, you know, who've been working for years on this. This is a testament of what we can do nowadays, and also introducing, you know, the latest in technology at the same time, but also giving these great CPUs and the raw performance that they're delivering at lower power.
Also really addressing like the shortcomings of the first two generations. They really got addressed in the third generation. And now you can see that it doesn't really matter which benchmark you take at it. You're at least competitive.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to see. So big step up. 1800X to 2700X, now to 3700X. You can really see it stepping up. So interesting to see. But of course, you have to put the CPU on something, and that's where we come in.
On a shelf. First.
True that. First on the shelf.
Yeah.
But of course, Martijn hopes you will take it off the shelf. And then we hope you take something else off the shelf because you need to combine it. Because with a good performing CPU, you need a good performing motherboard. So we already did a dedicated live stream where we introduced all our X570 motherboards. I'll give you some more in-depth information now.
Should we answer a few questions in the chat?
Yeah.
I've seen some pop up.
Let me see.
Is F clock or U clock? Yeah.
Next to
I saw something about safe V-core as well with overclocking.
Maybe we can go back to.
Yeah. 1325 is high current, 147 low. Okay. Now somebody asked for the safe voltages. Yeah, you got to find out yourself, but you know.
It also really depends on the cooling. What's the safe
depends
voltage?
It depends on the motherboard VRMs, you know, the quality of the motherboard itself, the cooling you're using, the way you've mounted it also makes sense. But also you don't want to go over, let's say, a 1.45 or a 1.47 at least, because it all depends on the cooling. If you see those extreme overclockers, they push 1.5, 1.6 sometimes through the CPUs. But it means they're using like liquid nitrogen or single stage cooling or cascade to cool that down. So it all depends on the combination you're using. But for air and you know, liquid coolers, I would definitely not go over 1.45 at this point. Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue. So for our motherboards, we have different segments. And if you know our segments from previous generations, you can see there is a new segment for X570, which is the prestige segment. And that's because third gen Ryzen in September can go all the way up to 16 cores. So that's where it's a really viable option for content creators as well. So we think the prestige series should also become part of this.
And prestige is your content creation.
That's our content creation line. Yeah, we also have this in notebooks, for example, or desktop systems, and now also on motherboards. Then we have the Pro series. They're a real no-nonsense. So if you want good performance, don't care about all the additional gaming features, RGB lighting, etc., then the Pro series are a great option.
Commercial, right?
Then for the gaming, we have three different segments. So MAG, Arsenal Gaming, the more basic gaming motherboards, performance gaming. They already offer a lot more, but at a competitive price. And if you want to go all out with features, want the best of the best performance, want all the features you can imagine on a motherboard, then we have the MEG series, the Enthusiast Gaming series, to address that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I have some questions in chat in between.
Memory overclocking, basically, most.
Yeah, we'll definitely
do the third gen
do the third gen
downclock.
downclock. My 1700 doesn't downclock when I overclock. When I OC it, it stays at 4 gigahertz all the time.
It depends if you turn on cool and quiet, for example, and if you overclock through PBO or manually overclocking by setting a multiplier. It all depends on that. So
you can set it fixed if you want to.
Yeah, if you're not sure about why it's not downclocking, etc., I'd recommend to read one of your favorite reviewers, for example, or your favorite media, who's done parts about overclocking. They'll explain step by step sometimes the guide, how to get best results, but also how to keep benefiting from cool and quiet or from lower idle speeds, etc., to save power as well.
Hussein is asking, so what difference does it make between X470 and X570? We'll address that in a minute.
Yeah. Just a minute, Hussein. Yeah. We're coming back to
that. Ryan is also already addressing something that we'll definitely talk about. Will the MSI I Love You 3000 Ryzen promotion will be available in US and Canada? We'll definitely talk about that promotion later. And we also have something to show in this case right here about that. So let's continue for now. We have the Pro series with the X570-A Pro. So real no-nonsense motherboard, no RGB integrated on the motherboard itself. You will have headers to connect RGB components if you want to. But you do get very stable base for your system, for 3rd gen Ryzen. Everything works perfectly fine out of the box. A lot of interesting features. Also, for example, here you see the PCB cutout for easy access to the SATA ports, but also the USB 3 header. So good motherboard, not specifically targeted at gamers, so it doesn't have all the advanced gaming features that you will see on some other models. But if you're not a gamer and you want a very fast system with a no-nonsense motherboard, Pro series are a great way for that. Then the Prestige series, we already shortly talked about this. This is really made for content creators.
It's beautiful.
And yeah, I think so too. I really love the design of our Creation motherboard. So we already know the Creation motherboards from X299, X399. So those are the high-end desktop platform motherboards. But now on the mainstream platform, as we're already having 12 cores and we'll be getting 16 cores in September, that's also a great base for a content creation system. So that's why we have the Prestige X570 Creation with the AM4 platform. And as you can see, it also comes with the M.2 Expander Z Gen4 add-in card that Martijn already shortly showed to you. And I'll talk about later what it can essentially do.
So all the PCI Gen4 greatness on this, slap a 3900X on it and call it a day.
So this is really, it is really targeted at a heavy CPU like Ryzen 9 for really heavy rendering tasks, stuff like that. But also expandability. So on the I/O, but also on the PCI-Express Gen4, etc.
Yeah, awesome.
Then for MPG, the Performance Gaming Series, we have 3 models: the MPG X570 Gaming Plus, the MPG X570 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi, and the MPG X570 Gaming Pro Carbon Wi-Fi. So the MPG X570 Gaming Plus has our traditional red and black gaming colors. We used to have those on a lot of motherboards in the past. Nowadays, it's a bit tricky with RGB lighting. It doesn't really match well with red accents. So this board doesn't have any RGB lighting on board, but still gives you that original black and red gaming vibe. On the Gaming Edge Wi-Fi and Game Pro Carbon Wi-Fi, we do have Mystic Light RGB integrated. So on the Gaming Edge, you will see the Mystic Light RGB behind the PCB. On the Game Pro Carbon Wi-Fi, you will have it both behind the PCB and on the I/O shroud. So that's also why those motherboards have a more neutral outlook. As the name already states, the Edge and the Carbon also have Wi-Fi, which we'll talk about later on. And then we have the Enthusiast Gaming. And this is your segment, right?
Of course, man. Yeah.
Also has an overclocker.
Yep.
This is where it goes all out. So we have the MEG X570 Ace and the MEG X570 Godlike. The Ace is actually in this system right here. The Godlike I have right here next to me. Really cool motherboards. And this is where it goes all out. So these have a very strong VRM, so suitable for up to the Ryzen 9, heavily overclocking, etc. a lot of expandability, multiple great gaming features, cool RGB lighting. You have the Mystic Light Infinity. You even have the Mystic Light Infinity 2 on the Godlike with the cool new effect. The Godlike also comes with the M.2 Expander Z Gen 4 card. So you will have a total of up to 5 M.2 Gen 4 SSDs. So all of them support Gen 4.
5.
So that's a lot of Gen 4 M.2 storage there. It also comes with a 10 gigabit LAN card in the box. So on the creation that we just talked about, the 10 gigabit is integrated on the motherboard itself. But the Godlike already has triple killer on the motherboard. So you have 2 killer
Triple
LAN ports.
killer sounds really godlike. So yeah.
It is on the Godlike, so it has to be. So you have 2 times LAN, 1 gigabit LAN, 2.5 gigabit LAN, and killer Wi-Fi. But it also comes with the adding card in the box, so you can add 10 gigabit LAN also to your Godlike motherboard. So the big thing with 3rd gen Ryzen and X570 is, of course, PCI-Express Gen 4. You already talked about it a bit. This is the official graph from the PCI SIG, where you see the different generations compared to each other. And they claim I/O bandwidth that it doubles every 3 years. Technically, when you see the announcement, yes, it does. But of course, it takes a lot of time to integrate this in products. PCI-Express Gen 4 has already been announced years ago, but it really takes time to optimize this, to really make it suitable that you can bring it to the market. And now the time has finally come. But what you see, for example, in 2007, we had 2.0. In 2011, we had PCI-Express 3.0. That was on the C68 chipset. And now we're 8 years later, and now we're getting PCI-Express 4.0. So in practice, you see that these times can be quite a bit longer. So it's really good to see the next step up in PCI-Express generation. And here you can see, for example, the 64 gigabyte per second. That's because it communicates to both sides. So you will have double the effective speed. But where do you use it for? Well, they already announced the Navi graphics cards, for example. So graphics cards in the future will support Gen 4. Already do now with Navi to be the first one. Also, different SSD vendors announced their M.2 SSDs with PCI-Express Gen 4 supported. But in the future, we can expect more. So, for example, LAN cards. Now, they're still PCI-Express Gen 3 or 2 even. But also USB controllers on the motherboard. You might think PCI-Express Generation 3 still offers plenty of bandwidth for all these kind of things. But the good thing about PCI-Express Gen 4 is that sometimes you only need 1 lane, for example, to attach something, where you need 2 on Gen 3 because of the bandwidth limitation that previous generations have compared to Gen 4. So essentially this means if you only need 1 lane, you have more lanes left for other things. So you can put more on your motherboard and all interconnected with each other.
Exactly. I saw a great question about that in the chat. Rayo412 is asking, PCIe is backwards compatible?
Yes, PCIe is backwards compatible. So if you have a Gen 4 slot and you put in a Gen 3 graphics card, you won't have any problem. Also the other way around, if you use Navi on X470, for example, it will work perfectly fine, but you will run it at Gen 3 PCI Express.
Correct.
So yes, it is backward and forward compatible. Let me see if we have some more questions. What's the 10 gigabit LAN chipset on the Godlike? It's the Aquantia 10 gigabit LAN chipset. It's both on the Godlike on the adding card and on the creation on the motherboard itself.
All right.
So for graphics cards, at this point, you see they don't fully utilize the bandwidth of Gen 3 yet. So here, for example, we have the RTX 2080 Ti Lightning Z. So that's pretty much the fastest graphics card you can get at this point. And there you see that you do see a slight increase when you go from Gen 3 with 8 lanes to 16 lanes, for example. But it hasn't reached the limit yet. So at this point, the benefit for Gen 4 on graphics cards is still quite limited. But of course, as graphics cards develop further, you need more bandwidth. So if you want to be future-proof and also want to benefit from future generations of graphics card, as Martijn already mentioned, the AM4 platform continues longer than we're used to from platforms. So also, for example, if you're running X570 with a future CPU and you also want a future graphics card on there, of course, future graphics cards will be faster, they have more power, so they will need more bandwidth. So over time...
It's only a matter of time for games to get optimized also as well. Yeah. And of course, you know, from content creation point of view, from PCI Gen 4 through graphics cards also makes sense to already have that on your board. I mean, if you're looking to upgrade now, then why should you even think about PCI Gen 3 at this point? If you know that there's PCI Gen 4 and if you're demanding on, you know, content creation, the highest performance, or just a high-end gamer, you'll be looking at the X570 platform.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of headroom for future generations, better performance. So even if you don't see a better frame rate right away, maybe in a couple of years you will thank yourself that you chose for Gen 4, because at that point...
Yeah, there's also a 3D Mark test now available. So if you already own an X570, be sure to check that out.
You can see the difference in bandwidth, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
But where you really do see a huge difference is in storage.
Yeah.
And that's also why the system is here, because we will live demonstrate what the difference will be like in M.2 Gen 4 storage, because that's a big difference. So let me just open this up. Yeah, so I need the screen up there. There we have it. So this system, let's first introduce it quickly.
Sure. You want me to help carry it?
Yeah, it's a big case.
Want
there we
tilt
go.
it more? Or?
Yeah, no, I think this is okay.
This is good? All right.
So let me open this up. We have CPU-Z installed here.
So I can open it?
So here we can already see. I think this is the first time I open CPU-Z, so it's still...
Yeah, it hasn't had any cache data.
But we can already start at the system. So the system we have here is 3rd gen Ryzen, obviously. This still runs a Ryzen 5 3600. That's because that was the CPU we had at hand when we built this. Now, of course, Martijn brought the nice 12 core. So I think, especially...
No, I'm going to take that home.
Especially on the Ace, a 12 core would be much nicer than 6 core.
Right.
But it's fine for this demonstration because we will show you Gen 4 performance. And Gen 4 you will have all the way from the Ryzen 5 3600 all the way up to the 3950 X16 core. So doesn't matter which one you use.
Correct.
I don't know why my CPU-Z isn't working.
Live demonstrations, man. It's always something
like
going
on. So we're using the MEG X570 Ace motherboard. Maybe we can get the close-up cam. Can you
sure.
put this in front so people can take a proper look inside?
Wait, I'll do the official thing. Like, close it. So this is on the outside. Yep.
So the Secura 500G case.
Yeah.
Cool new full tower case. Easy
you see Michiel in the corner hiding.
There I am.
Yeah.
On there is the Ryzen 5 3600 CPU. We have 16 gigabytes of Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB memory.
I'll get in there.
On 3200 megahertz. So this is the official spec for the 3rd gen Ryzen in memory speed. But of course, faster memory, like we explained before, if you go to 3600, you will still see a steep increase in performance. So now it runs the GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Lightning Z. So also the nice black color with the golden accent to get a cool match with the Ace motherboard. On there we have 3 SSDs. One you already see in the bottom. That's a traditional 2.5-inch SSD. It's a Kingston HyperX Fury RGB. So that's still a SATA SSD, but the other 2 are PCI-Express SSDs. So they're M.2. So they're currently hidden underneath the M.2 Shield Froster cooling on the motherboard.
Let's see if I can see it. No,
yeah, they're hard to see because they're underneath.
No, I can't get it. It's not enough light in there.
Yeah, it's
Need
hard.
more RGB, man.
Need more RGB, yeah. RGB, all the things.
Yep.
So we have 2 M.2 SSDs, and one is a Gen 3. It's a Western Digital Black 500 gigabyte, and that's a very fast Gen 3 SSD. And then we have a Gen 4, the Corsair MP600 1 terabyte. And everything's powered by a Corsair RM750X
So I'm going to
power
close this
supply.
now. A little bit back.
So that's the system we're using right now.
Yep.
So let's get to the benchmarks because we installed.
Uh-oh.
Whoa!
I pressed the button. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
So
I
Martijn
pressed
the button, so
Yeah.
the system is shutting down, but we'll just boot it again. Shouldn't take too long with the Gen 4 SSD.
At least I fixed your CPU-Z now, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Oh, it wasn't off
I'm
yet.
sorry. I was pressing the button when I was closing the window.
So let's boot it up again.
So
now,
one thing we've learned from
Martijn
this
already
case,
explained where the on-off button is on the Secura case. So it's right on top there, next to the USB port. And we'll be running Crystal Disk Mark. So what Crystal Disk Mark does is it measures the speed that PCI-Express SSDs can achieve. Also SATA SSDs, by the way. So general storage, how fast they are essentially. And we're going to take a look at the sequential read and write speeds of the SATA SSD, the Gen 3 SSD, and the Gen 4 SSD.
So where you benefit from responsiveness system and faster loading of your games and applications.
So let's start off with the SATA SSD. So that's like where SSD started, the traditional interface, still external cases. So no SSDs on the motherboard itself yet. You have SATA SSDs nowadays also.
Test count can be on 3, by the way. Save some time.
On this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take this one. We don't measure everything. It will take too long.
Exactly.
Full test.
Yeah. No, this is stressing your hard drive, so
yeah,
it's great, but it takes some time to finish. It's like Cinebench R20. I mean, remember that a couple of times ago, a couple of generations ago, was taking so long.
It took very long.
And now it's very fast. With the
new
Ryzen 3rd Gen, it takes a little less time.
So this one also still takes some time because of the SATA bottleneck, obviously. That goes up to 6 gigabit per second, whereas PCI-Express based on generation goes much, much further. So here you can see.
So this is the SATA 6 gigabit per second SSD.
Yeah. And it bottlenecks out pretty much.
That's the HyperX at the bottom, right?
Yeah, that's the HyperX at the bottom. Right. So this is normal SATA performance. So if you have a higher end SATA SSD, you can expect this kind of performance because it's a good SATA SSD.
This is typically in the system I showed like 3 years ago, where generally people like have like what you mentioned in your system. This is an SSD that most people had at that time.
And also to install your games, it's a good option because SATA SSDs are still quite affordable compared to PCI-Express. It is changing. Yeah. PCI-Express is getting more and more affordable, so more and more interesting. So let's keep this open. Right. Go to this one is the Western Digital Black PCI-Express Gen 3 SSD.
Yeah, it's definitely hidden. I can't see it. That means it's cooling.
Yeah.
Dissipating the heat at least.
And here we will see a huge step up because PCI-Express SSDs, they are already way, way faster than SATA SSDs. They don't have the bandwidth bottleneck that SATA has kicking in that early. So here we can see we already get 3000 in read speed. Bit depends on the model, how far they go, but Gen 3 SSDs max out at, even if you have the best model, they don't go any further than 3600. It's just not possible due to the interface.
Yeah, so this is PCI-Express Gen 3.
Gen 3.
So this is let's say the old generation
one,
PCI-Express. Yeah. Okay.
So this is already a huge step up compared to SATA. So you're going from 544 and 476 to 3131 and 2588. Now we have Gen 4, so that's this one. This is the Corsair MP600 1 terabyte.
It's this one, right?
Yeah, you have the box right there.
Maybe
we can, let me just show it.
That's this one.
There we go.
Oh.
An extremely new Gen 4 NVMe SSD. So this is one of the fastest models you can get at this point.
Let's see the speed.
So 3500, 3600 is like the maximum you could ever get on Gen 3. Wow. And here we can already see this is the first wave of Gen 4 SSDs. And they already achieve approximately 5000 megabytes per second. So not megabits, but megabytes on reading speed. And also on writing speed, it goes, you will see it in a minute, way beyond the bottleneck that you would have with Gen 3. So for storage, maybe on graphics cards you won't notice the improvement in bandwidth right away if you're a gamer. In the future you will. But with SSDs, you can already clearly see the improvement from Gen 3 to Gen 4.
This is a single SSD, right?
This is a single, single SSD.
All right. That's awesome.
So we rebooted the system. So I'm going to open up this again.
Yep.
I have to get back to the right page.
I'm sorry, Michiel. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let me see. Here we were. So still limited on graphics cards, but SSDs you saw the huge improvement. And this is with M.2 Expander Z Gen 4. So there you have space for 2 Gen 4 SSDs. So you can also put 2 in RAID 0 here. And with RAID 0, you can see you can already get over 9,000 megabytes per second on reading and over 8,000 on write speeds. That's insane compared to...
it's over 9,000.
It's over 9,000.
That's the mean, right?
Yeah. So this add-in card provides you 2 additional M.2 Gen 4 slots. It comes with the Godlike and the Creation. But if you manage to get your hands on one and you put it in another MSI X570 board, it will work because the BIOS supports it, but the BIOS needs to convert 8 lanes into 2x4. So this might not work on every board. So all our X570 motherboards support it, but it needs work from the BIOS. So important to have that support if you want to use it. To get PCI-Express Gen 4 properly working on your motherboard, you need to make a few design choices that are different from Gen 3. So with X470, for example, the previous generation, we still used a regular type of PCB. With X570, we're using a server-grade PCB. And a server-grade PCB gives you a better signal quality that you need to achieve the speeds of PCI-Express Gen 4. So it gives you approximately 30% better signal quality, but it's also a stronger construction. So this prevents bending, but it also has better heat resistance. And I think especially for an overclocker like Martijn, heat resistance is an interesting benefit that you will also have on a server-grade PCB.
Exactly.
But there's more you need for Gen 4, because some motherboards support multiple graphics cards. Then they need to divide 16 lanes into 2x8. And for that, you need special Gen 4 switches. But also for the bottom slots, because the traces have to overcome a certain length, you need redrivers for PCI-Express Gen 4 to still have a proper signal for the bottom slots. So that's why we made different choices from motherboard to motherboard. So if you compare, for example, our X570 Gaming Plus motherboard from the MPG series to the MEG X570 Ace on the right, then you see that the Ace motherboard has Gen 4 on every slot. So it doesn't matter which M.2 slot you have or which PCI-Express slot, you have Gen 4 on everything. So this one has the Gen 4 switches, the Gen 4 redrivers, but that's different on, for example, the Gaming Plus. So you will always see on all our motherboards, the primary M.2 slot and the graphics card slot, they will always support Gen 4. So if you're using one M.2 SSD and one graphics card, you'll be perfectly fine with any of the X570 boards. But for example, on the second M.2 slot on the Gaming Plus, there is no Gen 4 there. That's because there you need additional redrivers, and of course that makes a board more expensive. So that's where it differs from board to board, how much Gen 4 you get, pretty much. You can also see a difference in the CPU lane and the chipset lane. So the green ones all come, those lanes come from the CPU. So that's always the graphics card and the primary M.2 slot. But for example, the second M.2 slot on the Gaming Plus and the second and the third M.2 slot on the Ace, they are interconnected to the chipset. A lot of new technology also brings a little bit of heat up for the chipset. So X570, it simply generates more heat than X470, for example. So to address this, we also had to work on the cooling on our motherboards. So what we designed for this is the Frozr heatsink. And the Frozr heatsink can be found on all the MSI X570 motherboards. And it essentially means that you have active cooling on your chipset heatsink. For active cooling, we have a lot of experience in this in our graphics card department. So the first thing we did was we went to our graphics card department. We got different options we could use on the motherboard. We tested them out and we found out that the propeller blade fan was the most suitable option to use for chipset cooling on our X570 motherboards. And the propeller blade fan is the same type of fan that we used on our Twin Frozr 4 advanced graphics card cooling. Of course, it is a smaller version on the motherboard, but still, if we compare it to our competitors, we have a relatively large fan. So it's 45 millimeters, and by using a larger fan, you can simply have it spin slower and still provide the same amount of cooling. And if you have it spin lower, you can have a more silent system.
This is completely silent.
Yeah, it's completely. So
even the case fans are very silent.
Yeah, it is. Okay. The Secura case is really nice in both cooling and right. Also the noise levels. So the fan also has dual ball bearing. So in the past, maybe you heard a lot of horror stories about chipset fans on very old motherboards, and those often died because they used very cheap sleeve bearings. Dual ball bearings they're way more durable. So even if you use it many years, the fan won't die out on you. And what also helps with the lifespan of the fan is that we have zero Frozr technology. This is also something you know from our graphics card department. Zero Frozr technology essentially means that the fan will stop spinning if the temperature allows it. So we have 3 different fan profiles you can set in the BIOS. So they have default settings for different temperatures. So we have silence if you prefer lower noise levels over better cooling. We have balance, which is the default mode, which has a nice balance between noise levels and cooling. And then we have boost. If you don't think noise levels are very important, but you want the best cooling, then boost is the way to go. So for example, also during overclocking, then boost is of course most interesting. But based on the fan profile, that also decides when zero Frozr technology kicks in. For example, if you use silence, the fan will not spin up as fast as it would when you use boost. So that's about the chipset cooling. So it's quite an advanced system, and I think it's a huge step up from active cooling in the past, where the fan was always spinning. They still had very loud fans. So nowadays we use way more silent, way more durable fans. That can be passive if the situation allows for it.
So you want me to put this straight again?
Yeah, it's easier to see us, I think, if we put this straight.
Some people are asking for the giveaway. Is that still on?
Yeah, we definitely, maybe we can draw another winner.
Yeah, really?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So if you haven't participated in the giveaway yet, go to msi.com/2/insider. There you'll see the link to participate. If you can't see it, Ja will also put it in chat so you can directly go to Gleam and participate in the giveaway. You have the chance to win one of the $20 Steam codes. The more actions you perform, the bigger chance you'll have to win. And now we go to our 3rd winner of today. Oh, it's a difficult name. I already see that. So, Martijn, good luck with this one.
Which one is it? The top or the bottom one?
Oh, we also have a nickname. That's easier.
Suryanada70. I can do
nickname
that.
Isur. So, congratulations.
Yeah, nickname Isur.
You also won one of the $20 Steam codes. For who already participated, we will still have more winners. So, please be patient. If you haven't participated yet, do so, because you still have a chance to win.
Congratulations, Isur.
Congratulations. So back to the cooling, because Gen4 SSDs, they give you much higher performance, but that also generates a little bit of heat, or well, a little bit, in some situations quite a lot. If you put it under heavy load, if you're working with very large files, you put a lot of load on the controller on the SSD, and that can give you a pretty high temperature on the controller. So we did some testing with an SSD based on the Ryzen controller. This was just a basic model with no heatsink installed, and you could see that it reaches close to 100 degrees Celsius under load. So that's quite hot. To address this and to prevent the SSD from throttling, so if it throttles, if it reaches a certain temperature, the performance will go down. So that's something you don't want. To prevent this, we have M.2 Shield Frozr. So that's the cooling on top of the SSD. That will help to cool the SSD and to guarantee you better performance because you avoid throttling. And the M.2 Shield Frozr in combination with the Frozr heatsink we just talked about, you can see that with the same SSD and the same workload, you already go down from 96.6 to 65.6 degrees. So that's a huge step down. Then we have a Godlike exclusive, and one has dual-sided cooling, because now on the Gen 4 SSDs, you very often see that they're dual-sided. So they have chips on both sides of the SSD. So you also want cooling on both sides of the SSD. So on the Godlike, you also have cooling on the bottom, and that will even get the temperature down to 55.5 degrees under load.
So how does that work? Is that on the PCB itself from the motherboard?
Yes.
Layer?
Yeah, so you have like cooling, a heatsink below and on top, and also thermal pads to have proper contact with the SSD.
Okay.
So if you have an SSD, for example, that already has a heatsink on there, you might want to remove that that's on the default, and then use the M.2 Shield Frozr, because it can use a bigger surface area, so it will give you better cooling performance compared to the limited space that you have with a heatsink on the M.2
aesthetics,
SSD.
right? I mean, for aesthetics,
also
you want to keep the motherboard shape.
So both aesthetics and performance, it's very useful here. Here we see how also the Frozr heatsink, so the active cooling on the heatsink, can help with cooling the SSD. On the left, you see the fan disabled. So both are the same situation, but one has the fan disabled, one has the fan on the chipset enabled. And there you can already measure a 4-degree difference on the M.2 Shield Frozr heatsink. So also when the fan is running, it will help to cool down the SSDs and guarantee you that stable performance without any throttling on the Gen 4 SSD. So we already talked about the Frozr heatsink, but many of our boards also have extended heatsink or even extended heat pipe cooling. This will give you, for example, the extended heatsink cooling cools the VRM. And the VRM, Martijn knows all about it. It's very important for overclocking, for example, but also with technologies like Precision Boost Overdrive, where CPU can automatically overclock and draw more power. You need to cool that as well with VRM. So with extended heatsink cooling, you have a bigger surface area, so it's easier for the motherboard to dissipate the heat from the VRM. With extended heat pipe cooling, it either interconnects the extended heatsink with the Frozr heatsink, so you can use an even bigger surface area to dissipate all the heat and get better cooling performance on both the VRM and the chipset. Our VRM design goes back quite far. On the last generation AMD chipsets, so the 400 series, X470, B450, we already have a very good reputation. So what I have here is a tier list that enthusiasts on Reddit, they made this to define the quality of a VRM.
I'll look up close. I'm sorry, guys. Gotta be here. Okay.
So there you can see they divide it in different tiers. So you have top tier, high end, mid range, lower end. And as you can see, in the higher tiers, we have a lot of our 400 series mainboards. So of course, we're very proud of this. And that's also why we chose to build further upon the VRM design that we used in the 400 series. So if we take a look at the 500 series, here you, for example, see the VRM design on the Godlike. So it uses the IR35201 PWM controller with doublers. They are located on the back of the motherboard, and they're connected to the power stages. Power stages are on the front. Here they are marked in red. And we use Infineon power stages that are rated at 70 amps. So that's a crazy amount of power that you, in theory, could bring to your CPU. So of course, if you will run your CPU at stock, you will never need this kind of power. If you're going to do overclocking, however, and if, for example, if you're going to extreme overclocking, well, maybe you can tell more about this, because Martijn is an extreme overclocking.
This is plenty. I mean, if you look at the placement and the number of sheer power phases and the amps that they're able to handle, I mean, I think every overclocker should have a real fun with this board.
And also especially because you also do sub-zero cooling, right?
Yeah, LN2. So this is where this kicks in. I mean, this helps already with, if you have a serious, custom built water cooling, of course, and you tend to step it up a notch. However, this sheer amount of phases and the quality of the phases really helps when going sub-zero. So it's looking great for if you want to do extreme overclocking on this board.
So we have some questions in chat. Let me see. If you use a Gen 3 NVMe SSD and then use a Gen 4 slot, will it work? Is it backwards compatible? Yes, you can put. Actually, we're now using the X570 Ace motherboard that only has Gen 4 M.2 slots on there. But we also ran the benchmark with the Gen 3 SSD. So it's no problem, but of course it will run with the Gen 3 interface. So it will not be as fast as...
Anything PCI-Express related will always be backwards compatible.
Yeah.
So if you buy an X570 motherboard and you still have a PCI Gen 3 SSD, you can still use it. I mean, you can still use it as a secondary SSD, for example. So if you buy a new SSD, which will be your Windows boot drive, for example, or your most important application games are installed on that, you can use that and still have the old one you had laying around, still reuse that, because this board had like 4 M.2 slots, right?
This one has 3.
Oh,
but,
3, plus the extender. Yeah, exactly. So you'll still have plenty of options to go with your older hardware, still reuse that.
Yeah. And also the other way around. For example, if you're on X370 or X470 or B350, B450, and if you're planning to upgrade to an SSD, you can already take a look at a Gen 4 SSD. Yep. If you're planning to upgrade to a new motherboard in the future, you can already use a Gen 4 SSD on an older motherboard and benefit from the speed if you upgrade to the latest generation.
Exactly. If you
with
plan
3rd Gen Ryzen X570.
If you plan to do it in phases, for example, instead of spending all the money at once, you can still take that in consideration, future-proofing, already purchase a Gen 4 SSD and still run it on X370 or B450.
Because it will run perfectly fine. It will just max out at the Gen 3 interface. So you will not see higher speeds than approximately 3600. That's where the bottleneck of Gen 3 kicks in. But you can make use of it later on if you upgrade to a newer platform.
Yeah.
So for our VRM, here we see our top model on X470 and our top model on X570. So even though we use the same design philosophy, we're still improving on the design. We're still improving on the components, and you can also see that in the ripple, for example. So the lower ripple you have, the more stable the power connection from the motherboard to the CPU essentially is. So on the gaming M7, which was our flagship model on X470, it already had a very low ripple under load of 96 millivolts. So that's a very low ripple already. But on the Godlike, that even went down to 71.2 millivolts.
That means in terms of usage, less crashing.
Exactly.
More stable power supply will give you higher overclocks, sustainable higher clocks, for example. The quality of the VRMs, and it's basically, the number of VRMs is sharing those powers, so it gives you a little bit less ripple, of course, but also the quality and the components used gives you less ripple and a more stable power supply. So the best stability and less chance of crashing due to, unstable power delivery.
And also, if you want to do record-breaking overclocking, sometimes you have to be very fast with verifying your achievement. And then if your ripple is too high, your system crashes because of it. That
idle load differences.
Can be the difference between a record and not setting a record.
Oh yeah, we've seen that a couple of times.
So these are pictures from, I think this was the Tech Day, right?
Yeah, it was in LA. Actually.
So it was very good to see that AMD also chose our X570 Godlike motherboard to break multiple records with the new 3950X 16-core CPU.
And this was just casually outside.
Casually.
Look at those guys.
Casually with liquid nitrogen.
they were just casually outside in the nice LA weather. And I was standing around it, like asking bugging them with questions. But they still managed to break all those records. So that's great.
Yeah, they did very well. So they combined the X570 Godlike motherboard with the 3950X 16-core CPU. So that's the one that will be released in September. And they broke multiple world records here. So here we can already see Cinebench and Geekbench world records. And this is just the beginning of overclocking.
Yep.
Because here we see, for example, 5434 points on Cinebench R15, which was at that point already a record. But a little bit later on, that already got broken again.
It's already 4 weeks ago. So you know what happens with overclocking each week,
And we were, of course, very happy to see that, again, the X570 Godlike was used for this with the 3950X. Here it was on 5.4 gigahertz with 1.776 volt V-core. That's a very high V-core. Don't try that at home.
Don't do that at
This
home.
is all with liquid nitrogen cooling. That's the only way with the sub-zero cooling to to be able to run these kind of voltages and frequencies. And here we can see it already went over 5,500 points in Cinebench, which is a lot, especially for a mainstream platform. This is stuff you could, up to this point, you could only find this on the high-end desktop platforms.
Exactly.
So now mainstream platform over 5,500. And also memory overclocking. So this is a slide from AMD from the presentation during the keynote at Computex 2019. And there we could already see that the 3rd gen Ryzen made huge improvements on memory, and combined with the DDR4 boost on our X570 Godlike motherboard, DDR4 boost also on our other motherboards. But the combination of the Godlike and 3rd gen Ryzen already went over 5,100 megahertz, and this is on air running dual channel. So that's also a big difference. It's a lot easier to overclock very high with a single DIMM. You don't have as much load on your memory controller, stuff like that.
But this can be beneficial to anyone. I mean, if you're really handy with, your primary, secondary, and tertiary timings, and you find the skill to, overclock your memory frequency to the highest possible.
And to do this dual channel is hard.
And then do it dual channel, because that's where you actually see the benefit. I mean, single channel is less beneficial to, your games and applications, etc. This is a real testament to the improvements made on, both X570, you guys, but also the Zen architecture, Zen 2.
So this combination can do already 5,100. So the previous generations Ryzen's, they weren't known for extreme memory clocks on DDR4, but that's where we see a huge difference with the 3rd gen Ryzen, because this already comes quite close to our world record. So on the X570 Godlike with 3rd gen Ryzen, this is actually already outdated as we speak.
I saw something yesterday or the day before.
Because our in-house overclocker already broke this top PC. Here he had 5677. I think he already broke 5700.
5774 or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Shout out to Top PC. Great job.
So those are insane memory speeds. Of course, this is single channel using liquid nitrogen. This is really extreme overclocking.
Yep.
On the right, you see our current DDR4 memory record. So this is on the Z390 ITX board, and that's 5886. So actually, we're already approaching the world record now with 3rd gen Ryzen and X570 Godlike motherboard. So insane steps to see on the AMD platform what it can achieve with memory speeds. And that has to do a lot with X570 DDR4 boost technology also. All our motherboards use daisy chain design. So if you want to know more about this, we did a dedicated live stream about DDR4 where we explain the differences between daisy chain, T-topology, for example. So I won't dive too deep into that right now, because this is quite tough material. It's quite complicated, quite technical. But daisy chain allows you to get higher overclocks, better memory frequencies, so you're also able to set these kinds of records. DDR4 boost also gives you shorter memory traces for a clearer signal, isolated from other components, so there cannot be any interference with other components on your motherboard. So really creating the perfect environment for the communication between the 3rd gen Ryzen CPU and the DDR4 memory on the motherboard. Also, something we really work on a lot over the years are verified memory modules. So
that's important.
Yeah, it's very important, because there's so many different kind of DDR4 modules nowadays, and of course you want to make sure that the modules that you buy are compatible with your motherboard. So on X370 at the 1st generation Ryzen launch, we had close to 600 verified DDR4 modules. On X470 last year we already had 842. Now X570, we already have over 1,200 verified DDR4 memory modules. So it's a lot of information. You can look it up on the website for each X570 board. At support, you can find exactly which modules are tested and supported. Also, if they're compatible with 2DIMM, 4DIMM, etc. So definitely, before you buy a motherboard, make sure your DIMMs are compatible. But with these kind of numbers, most mainstream memory modules will, of course, be supported officially.
And I guess for your enthusiasts out there, this includes all the popular B die and E die kits.
Exactly.
And that's the most important part.
For the extreme overclocking,
who are looking for more
definitely,
overclocking and manual, then
But also, for example, content creators, you want to have a rock stable system.
Exactly.
So you want to make sure that the modules you're buying were properly tested on the motherboard you're buying, and was made sure that it works perfectly fine. XMP, many people will of course know this as an Intel technology, but we also offer XMP on AMD. So many memory modules, they have different presets like profiles in the modules. So you have JDEC, but also XMP. And XMP has not only modified memory frequency and timings, but also allows for a higher voltage. And with a higher voltage, you can get higher speeds as well. So simple click in the first screen of the BIOS, actually, you can enable XMP, and you will benefit from the XMP profile on your 3rd gen Ryzen system. So very easy.
Lesson number 1, never forget this.
Never forget this. So, this is only one mouse click, but it's a very useful mouse click.
Yes.
Because if you run a stock JDEC profile, they're generally a lot slower than
2133 most of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you get like the default DDR4 frequencies.
Yeah, it's a shame if you're missing out on performance, which
it's free performance.
You paid for.
It's only one mouse click.
Yeah.
First screen of the BIOS. So go in your BIOS, click on the on button, and then you enable the faster profile that is already in your memory module. And as we saw already, 3rd gen Ryzen up to 3600 megahertz, it really benefits a lot from those faster memory speeds. So yeah, free performance, use it. On the rear I/O panel, this is very different from motherboard to motherboard, but many of our models have an integrated I/O shield. I can show this up front. I have the godlike motherboard here.
Should I help or?
No, it's okay.
Right.
I have the camera right here.
We're good.
So this, for me, this is the best invention ever. I always lost those I/O shields. So I can't even remember how many motherboards I have laying around at home without an I/O shield anymore.
I still have one system where I forgot it and I just left it.
Yeah, that's
like
also
a very
horrible.
old system because I have 4 systems, and I was like, forget about it.
That's horrible when you install the motherboard and then you find out that you forgot to install the I/O shield.
If you're swapping and upgrading all the time, you tend to forget sometimes. Yeah.
So that's all solved with the integrated I/O shield. So many of our boards have this. What you can also see right here are 2 buttons. One is the flash BIOS button, so you can easily flash your BIOS by just putting in the right USB key with the right file and connecting your power supply. So no need for CPU, GPU, memory, etc. The other one is the clear CMOS button. So very easy if you're doing, for example, extreme overclocks. If you want to reset to the default settings of the BIOS, simply press the clear CMOS and it will all go back to stock.
So you never have to worry.
Exactly.
I mean, if the system becomes unstable and you can't boot successfully into Windows anymore.
And the Godlike, for example, also offers dual BIOS.
Yeah, and be sure to only press the button when your system's turned off. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because if you don't...
Yeah, because you will reset everything.
Then,
It's not something in the middle of a game.
No, or halfway during booting or whatever, don't press that. Just make sure your system's fully turned off and then press it for like 3 seconds or so.
And then it will